Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's The Hindu Newspaper Analysis, where we shall be discussing today's Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper, and we shall be analyzing few of the important topics which have appeared from the point of view of the examination. Now, while discussing each of these topics, we shall try to gain a peripheral viewpoint as well, and we shall try to understand the implications that these topics have and the larger implications both in terms of your prelims as well as for your mains examination. Immediately after the discussion, the quiz for the objective questions shall be uploaded on our Telegram channel, which I advise and suggest all of you to do attempt that quiz and take an assessment of your level of understanding for this proper analysis. Now, taking a look at the topics that we are going to discuss today. So just like the norm, today again we are discussing around 7 to 8 topics, but out of that, 4 topics we shall be delving into greater detail. And those are the topics which are going to be relevant both for your prelims as well as for your mains examination. And then we shall be discussing few of the topics which are relevant only for your prelims examination. So this is something which we shall be doing or conducting a discussion in brief. So we shall be starting the discussion with the anti-defection law is facing convulsions. Now, convulsions basically means some amount of complications. So this is an editorial topic which has appeared in page 6 of the Delhi edition of the newspaper, and this talks about the political crisis which is present in Maharashtra and the ongoing political crisis and uncertainty, and where does the anti-defection law stand amongst all that. So this is something which is very relevant for the portion of governance in your paper 2 of the examination. Then after that, we come across a question, or rather a topic for international relations, and that is a Zeitenwende in India-Germany relationship. Here, Zeitenwende is a German term or a German terminology which refers to a turning point. So it talks about the turning point in India-Germany relationship and how the future beckons in front of us and how the future is bright before us. So this is something which is related to IR, which again is relevant for your paper 2. Then how to become a green hydrogen superpower. This is about the prospect and the possibilities that we have with the production of green hydrogen and also the paths that we are taking for that production. This is something which is going to be relevant for your paper 3. And this is something which is going to be very, very relevant for the coming year as well as for the year 2024. As and when the entire world is going to discuss about green hydrogen, this particular topic becomes much more important and relevant. Then multilateral reforms as a priority for G20. Again, a portion of IR that again comes under paper 2. So overall, your GS paper 2 and GS paper 3 portions shall be covered with the coverage of these topics, and then few of the important ones for the prelims, and then we will tackle the mains type of questions which can be asked from this area. We shall try to understand what are the kinds of approaches that you can take while answering those questions. Now, without further ado, let us initiate the discussion. Now, before initiating a discussion, one important correction to be made. Now, in yesterday's CNA discussion, while discussing about Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it was said and it was mentioned that SCO as of now has got 8 members, but right now, SCO or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has got 9 members. With the addition of Turkey in 2022, the total membership of Shanghai Cooperation Organization has been up to 9 members. So that is a correction that you can make in whatever notes that you are preparing. Now, having said that, let us introduce ourselves with the first topic of the day, and that is something which has appeared in page 6 of the Delhi edition, relevant for your paper 2. And this is about the anti-defection law is facing convulsions. Now, let us understand the context and the backdrop in which we are having this discussion, or why these articles keep on repeating themselves time and time again in the newspaper. This also gives you an idea and an understanding about what is relevant for the examination. Let me tell you how. So we all know that in the case of Maharashtra, particularly the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly, the state legislature which is present, there has been a lot of political turmoil and political uncertainty which has been present, and that is primarily because a significant portion of the ruling party, significant number of members from the ruling party, they basically switched sides in a way that they led to a kind of a complete breakdown of the party. As a result of that, the ruling coalition lost power and the opposition came into power. Now, since that point of time, this case has been taken to the court, that is the Bombay High Court, and now it is at the doorsteps of the Supreme Court. So that is why anti-defection law, which basically talks about disqualification of candidates who desert a party under certain circumstances, that anti-defection law has been in discussion, has been in relevance for the past few months. Now, UPSC tends to ask from these areas. But UPSC is not going to ask you a direct question that what is happening in Maharashtra or what should happen in Maharashtra. UPSC will ask you the exact basic concept of it. That what do you mean by anti-defection law? Under what conditions are they applicable? Are there any exceptions to the anti-defection law which are present? And also, what is the Supreme Court's understanding for that anti-defection law? What are the judgments that Supreme Court has passed in this particular scenario? So these are the peripheral areas that you need to prepare with respect to any of these current affairs that come into discussion. So that is the background of this topic and this article. Now here, we shall be discussing the aspect of what do we mean by this anti-defection law. We shall be discussing about the relevant Supreme Court judgment as well. So basically, when we talk about anti-defection law, this is something which is included in the 10th schedule of the Constitution. Again, these are important pointers for your prelims examination, by the way, that under which schedule do we have the conditionalities of anti-defection law and so on. So this is something which is present in the 10th schedule, and it was put there and provided there as a result of the 52nd Amendment Act 1985. Okay? So that 52nd Amendment Act provided for the disqualification of candidates both from the parliament as well as from the state legislature in case they are switching sides. Now, why is it that there was a need which was felt for promulgating this law? After all, when we talk about the representatives or the legislative members or the parliamentarians, they have been elected by the people, and the people's mandate is the chief. So thereby, if these people or these elected representatives, they feel the compulsion or the necessity to join any other political party or switch sides, there should be a freedom given about it, isn't it? So why is it that a need was felt for this law to come in? That is because if you take a look at the Indian political scenario throughout the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, it was marred and dotted with candidates switching sides and thereby leading to a lot of political instability. They would basically run elections under a different political banner, and eventually after the results were declared, everybody was attracted by power and basically the benefits of power, and they would switch sides to form government under any cost. So in order to prevent that, that is why the anti-defection law came in. Now, while I am recounting this entire ordeal about the circumstances which led to this law, thereby you could also get a scenario that even in the present day and age, we are observing something very similar, where the pre-election promises or the pre-poll alliances, they hold little substance, and it is after the results where you have the formation of new groupings and new alliances which do take place. You also have people switching sides quite frequently and quite freely. So the need for anti-defection law still persists and is still present. Now here, the purpose was very simple. The two objectives needed to be met for this anti-defection law. What were the objectives for this law? First, to curb the act of defection, so that the elected representatives, whereby they should have some amount of gravitas, and thereby they should stick to the political party or the political banner under which they have won the election. And in a way, if they are doing so, they are basically holding true to their mandate, the mandate for which people have voted them into power. right? And it was also so that people would not be tempted by power politics, so that if you switch sides, immediately you will be disqualified as a member. So you are not tempted by the temptations that power holds. Okay? Then the second objective was to protect political parties from instability. Because, please understand, the lure of power is very significant. If any political party, let's say, holds a very thin majority in the legislature or in the parliament, very thin majority, and if somehow by money power, muscle power, or maybe by some other lurings, if you are able to wean away few of the elected candidates, then that government, that elected government, that political party immediately will be thrown from power. And in this way, you can create a kind of an instability both in the governance as well as in the political scenario. So we needed to stop that. And that is where this particular law or this particular 10 schedule came into picture. Now here, when we talk about it, basically this anti-defection law lays down very clearly the important grounds which need to be followed when disqualification is in picture, or under what conditions can a candidate be disqualified from their post. So here, if you take a look at it, if an elected member gives up his membership of a political party voluntarily, that on his own, let's suppose I get elected somehow, and I get elected with a political party A. Now, after being elected, let's say I renounce my membership of that political party. I give up that membership of the political party under whose banner I had fought and won the election. So I shall be liable to be disqualified, right? The disqualification provisions would stand for the disqualification of the candidate. And then if he votes or abstains, abstains means does not vote. So if he votes or abstains from voting in the House, contrary to any direction issued by his political party, meaning what? Let's say there is a particular bill in place. Let's assume e-waste bill, right? Just as an example I'm giving you. Now for that e-waste bill, a political party A has decided that it will vote against, let's say. It will vote against that bill. Now, that means, let's suppose A has got 50 members or 50 legislators or 50 parliamentarians. Let's assume 50 MLAs. Now, thereby, the party issues a whip, a kind of a direction, that all of the members have to vote against that bill because we as a political party, we are against that bill. Now, if suppose out of this 50 MLAs, 4 MLAs, let's suppose, they vote in favor. So what they are doing is they are defying the orders of the political party from which they belong to. The voting pattern indicated by the political party, they are defying that. So these 4 MLAs, they shall stand disqualified, or the provisions of disqualification will stand valid in this case. So that is why even when you observe on a day-to-day scenario voting that goes on maybe for Rajya Sabha, right, for election of Rajya Sabha members or on any particular bill, it is the party, the political party which issues a direction by the whip, and that is something which has to be followed by everyone. Then, if any member who is independently elected joins a political party, let's suppose I have basically run this election as an independent candidate, and throughout my election campaign I have said that all the political parties, they are basically goons, mafias, etc., and that is why please vote for me. Now people have voted for me, and after getting elected I find out that political party A is in power. So if I join that political party A, maybe I will get a ministerial berth, or I can become a particularly important minister. So if I do that, if I join a political party in the lure of power generally, then again the member stands to be disqualified. Then, if any nominated member joins any political party after the end of 6 months. So nominated members are there in the case of the parliament as well as the state legislators. We do know that in Rajya Sabha also we have nominated members. So if they start joining a political party after 6 months of their nomination, then again they stand to be disqualified. Now the decision on disqualification, questions on the ground of defection is referred to the speaker or the chairperson of the house, and that decision is final. So all the questions with regards to disqualification, they are generally decided by the chairperson of the house or the speaker, and thereby their decisions are absolutely final. Now this particular point has created a lot of controversy, because if so much power is vested in one individual, that automatically ends up creating a lot of grievances, lot of contraventions in various different places. And it is because precisely of this reason why the entire law was taken to the Supreme Court to check and test its legality, whereby in the initial framing of the law, it was also stated that the decision taken by the speaker shall be final and there shall not be any questions raised against that decision in the court of law. That was the initial statement or the wording of this law. But Supreme Court in its later judgments thereby said that while that decision is sacrosanct and very important, at the same time, everything is something which should be justified by law and is questionable by the courts as well. So the decision taken by the speaker or the chairperson of the house is no longer above the law. So you have questions asked by the courts frequently about those decisions. Then, all proceedings in relation to disqualification under this schedule are considered to be proceedings in the parliament or the legislature itself. Okay, they are all these discussions and the proceedings that who will get disqualified, why should they be disqualified, all these are very much within the ambit of the parliamentary or the legislative proceedings. Okay, you don't need to have a special permission for that. It is just a part and parcel of the legislative proceedings. However, this law also provided for a certain exceptions. Exceptions in what case? Exceptions that under what conditions will the members, will the legislators not be disqualified immediately? Because after all, everything cannot be swept with the same broom. You cannot have one size fits all. You need to have different characteristics and criteria. So here are the exceptions. In a situation where 2/3 of the legislators of any political party, 2/3 of the legislators of a political party, they decide to merge into any other party. So for example, let's say I have A, I have B. Right? Now, let's say 2/3 of B, they decide to join and merge their political party with A. Then in that case, there won't be any disqualification. What is the logic behind this? The logic is very simple, that if you have the significant majority of a political party trying to take a decision, then it should be absolutely democratic to help them or to allow them to do so. Right? So that is no longer a political compulsion. That is something which is the political expediency of the day. It is the necessity of the day, maybe. So that is why this is something which is rendered free from the proceedings of disqualification. Then, any person elected as chairman or speaker can resign from his party and join the party if he demits that post. So that position of speaker in itself, that is considered to be non-partisan. Or the chairperson of the house, that position is considered to be non-partisan. So in many of the cases, that individual does resign from the party immediately to ensure and to maintain that non-partisanship. So those speakers and the chairpersons of the house, they are free to rejoin their party and they won't stand the entire aspect of disqualification to be meted out to them. Then, earlier the law allowed parties to be split, But at present, this has been outlawed because earlier you also had a provision that few members of the political party, if they decide to join another party under certain circumstances, they can do so. But this has been outlawed in order to prevent horse trading, where you pay the legislators to join a political party. So this is the aspect of the anti-defection law. This in itself, the conditions and the criteria for disqualification and the exception that it holds, that in itself becomes very essentially important both for your prelims as well as for your mains examination, and drill it inside your mind that this is one of the most important topics going ahead for the further couple of years now. Now, here, this particular law, when it was passed, its legality was something which was frowned upon. It was doubted upon. And that is why this law was taken to the doorsteps of Supreme Court. That if the speaker has got so much power, and should the speaker have so much power in that case? And should the speaker be the only person deciding what will be the outcome of this procedure of disqualification? So that is where Supreme Court heard the case under the very famous Kyoto-Holahan case, as it is referred to. And you will find this question has been asked in UPSC mains examination earlier as well. It was a direct question that what was the Kyoto-Holahan case. So sometimes UPSC can also ask you direct questions like this, the important cases that are there. So this Kyoto-Holahan case was when Supreme Court took the hearing of the entire procedure of the anti-defection law. And in its judgment, in a majority judgment, the Supreme Court basically decided that the powers given to the speaker, they indeed are sacrosanct, but the decisions taken by the speaker, that can be questioned in the court of law for the aspect of natural justice. So it is something whereby the speaker or the chairperson, they are not above or beyond the law. They lie very much within the ambits of the law, which rules everyone out there. So that is where partially speaker was given a lot of power, but there also he was basically made questionable at the same time. Now, then the Supreme Court upheld the sweeping discretion available to the speaker in deciding the cases of disqualification of MLAs. Now here, as a result of this Kyoto-Holahan judgment, while it simplified the matters a little bit, at the same time, it also has to be pointed out that not all the judges agreed to that Kyoto-Holahan judgment. And you had a couple of judges who issued a dissenting judgment. They did not agree with the majority point of view. And why we are focusing upon the dissenting judgment is that now when you take a look at the dissenting judgment, the article almost aligns with that, because the article also talks about the fact that when we are trusting the speaker with all these issues, can we trust the speaker himself or herself? Because is that post apolitical as we consider it, or is that post as apolitical as the constitution makers enshrined it to be? It is no longer so. We are aware that across the country from north to south, east to west, the position and the post of speaker or the chairperson of the house, while it is highly coveted, it is no longer non-partisan. There are always leanings and a kind of a sort of a prejudice shown towards the ruling party from which the speaker generally comes from. So you had Justices Lalit Mohan Sharma and J.S. Verma, they dissented. And they took a different route and a view. So basically they said that the tenure of the speaker, who is the authority in the 10th schedule to decide this dispute, the tenure in itself is dependent on the continuous support of the majority of the house. What is the meaning of this? So basically, let's suppose political party A is in power. They have selected or elected the speaker. Now, why is it that they have been able to elect that speaker? Because that particular individual represents a majority, or that political party represents a majority, right? If A loses majority somehow, then will the election of the speaker be held valid anymore? Because that position in itself will be liable to a newer election where newer formulations in the legislature, they will be forced to elect a new speaker. So, therefore, he does not satisfy the requirement of such an independent adjudicatory authority, which means that because Speaker is so much dependent on the political parties who have elected them, they cannot truly hold an independent view. And this is something which we have been observing quite frequently for the past 10-15 years, whichever state legislature that you take a look into. Wherever there is a political turmoil, the post of the Speaker is first of all contested. The opposing members, they don't trust the Speaker themselves because they think that the decision taken will be absolutely partisan. And in many of the cases, that is prejudice towards a political party. So in a way, the entire conceptualization of that anti-defection law, that has been masked by the power given to the Speaker and provided how political that post has been in the recent era. So that is why, despite the novel objectives that this particular law had, despite the larger goals that it set in order to purify or refine the parliamentary democracy in a country like India, still, despite of that, presently we are observing a lot of political turmoil in many different states, right? You have observed the members switching sides in almost all the states now in the past 10-15 years. You would see that, be it the northeastern states such as Meghalaya or Madhya Pradesh or Maharashtra, everywhere you have members switching sides, and many of them, they go scot-free, in the sense that they are able to upturn the government, overturn the government, and they are able to extract the largesse of power which is given to them by the bribing authority in a way, or the political party which wants them to join their force. Now here, there must have been certain issues in the 10th schedule due to which we are still experiencing these issues. So what are the issues with 10th schedule where we can improve? The first issue is that there is no prescribed time limit under which the Speaker has to act. So if you don't have a prescribed time limit, that means the proceedings for that disqualification can go on endlessly, to the benefit of the political party who wants to stay in power or who have the larger numbers at play. They can always manipulate this through their role by the Speaker and keep it going endlessly. And as a result of that, the entire assembly structure, the government of the day, they shall be held at jeopardy because of this lack of a time limit. So there needs to be a time limit. Maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe 3 months. In these cases, you need the judgments to be done as quickly as possible. So that is why maybe 3 months should be set as a time window within which the Speaker has to decide. In most of the cases, this proceeding drags on for more than a year and a half, by the time the public would have entirely forgotten the fact that their representatives are the ones who have jumped ship. So that is something which needs to be cured. And also, over a period of time since Kyoto Holahan case has come into picture, there have been so many various judgments given by the Supreme Court, and the judgments have been of a varying degree and varying proportions depending upon the state that they are dealing with. So they cannot give the same judgment for every state. Which means what? Which means now we have multiple interpretations which can be made of the judgment. So because you have multiple interpretation, that always leaves behind a kind of a big loophole which are exploited by the political parties. For example, if you take a look at it, the law says that a member can be disqualified if he voluntarily gives up his membership. Now, voluntarily gives up his membership means what? That I, as a member of a political party, I put down my papers, I resign, and I submit it. That is voluntary action. However, the Supreme Court has interpreted that without a formal resignation by a member, the giving up of membership can be inferred by their conduct. So if maybe my conduct is not as per the whims or the requirements of a political party, they can very quickly reach a conclusion that I have given up my membership, which is not the case. And that is why you also have instances where the chairperson of the upper house, that is Rajya Sabha, the chairperson had disqualified 2 members just on this criteria that they have voluntarily given up their membership, whereas they were simply not performing as per the conduct expected out of them. So that is the aspect of the 10th schedule dealt with in this article. So in this article, what we have studied, what is that 10th schedule that deals with disqualification, and then thereafter, what is the Supreme Court's understanding about this, what are the criteria on which disqualification can be made, what are the exceptions, and what are the various areas where there is a scope for improvement. So it also provides you with the category of way forward while you are crafting your answer. Okay? Now, after this, we move on to the second topic of the day, or the second article. And the second article is a Zeitenwende in India-Germany relationship. This is again in page 6, and this is for paper 2. Zeitenwende here refers to what? It refers to a turning point. Now, what does this article talk about? Now, recently, in the month of February, you had the German Chancellor Scholz, who had his visit in India. He was accorded a grand reception and a particular presidential welcome in India, and thereby the various different noises which were made both by the Indian side and German side, that all pointed to a kind of a similarity of opinion and a brighter future. So that is what this article talks about, that how Indo-German relationship is on the precipice or a cusp of change, whereby it is supposed to be changing for better. Now, historically, there have been some issues which have been prevalent in the case of Indo-German relationship. Let us analyze that. So first of all, India's relationship with Germany has traditionally lagged behind when compared to its relation with few of the other EU member countries. For example, if you take the case of France, India has enjoyed a very boisterous and a very significant and a prominent relationship with France over the years. Whosoever has been in power either in India or in France, they have basically promoted Indo-French relationship. So like that momentum, that is something which is lacking in the case of Indo-German relationship. Then benign mutual neglect coupled with Germany's primary focus on China are a couple of factors for the same. That means what? Both the countries, they are liable for ignoring each other here and there, and Germany over the past few years, almost since the past 5 to 6 years, has put an increased emphasis and overemphasis on sorts on improving its relationship with China. Right? And that is something which has always been indicated by the German leadership with the amount of dealings that the German and the Chinese industries are having. Even the visit by Chancellor Scholz that we are talking about. Now, Chancellor Scholz made it a point to visit China in November 2022, and there again he had a very extensive dealings with the Chinese industry, because he and in fact Germany, they are very interested in establishing an industrial relationship between the two. So that is something which is irking India. That is something which is not making India very comfortable per se. However, since the Ukraine war has begun, and it has been almost 1 year since the initial attack by Russia on Ukraine. So since that 1 year, the relationship has been changing ever so slightly. When the Chancellor visited India, thereby that particular day also ended up marking the 1 year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Now, in this scenario, Russian invasion has been termed as the turning point, okay, or the Zeitenwende. Now here, has led to the abandonment of decades of post-war pacifism towards strategic matters by Germany. What is the meaning of this? So, after World War II, and because Germany was so actively involved both in World War I and World War II and had suffered devastating losses in these global wars, after World War II, Germany had basically made a kind of a policy, and much more so after the unification of Germany happened in 1990. After that, there had been a concerted effort to focus on human development, industrialization, and economic growth. The aspect of military leadership or a kind of military alliances and military aggression, that is something which was kept on the back burner. So that was what was also referred to as a post-war pacifism. That is, now we are no longer interested in war. After the ordeal of the two world wars, now we want peace. So that was the external policy for the countries like Germany, Japan, etc., which they had held for decades. Now, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this kind of prohibition that they have imposed on themselves, that was shed by these countries. Now, Germany's pledge to boost defense spending to 2% of GDP, that decision has also been taken because it has been realized. And if you basically hold a kind of an analogy, similar steps are being taken by Japan as well. They are also trying to basically increase their defense spending suddenly after decades of non-activity in the defense forces due to a kind of a peace-loving nature, or the peace or trying to attain a long-lasting peace in the global community of nations. Now, Russia's war and China's assertive posturing have brought into question Germany's effort, whereby Germany had a principle that is Wandel durch Handel, which means change through trade. Which means what? That if Germany and China, let's say they indulge in trade and that bilateral trade is growing quite significantly. Now, if that ends up happening where the bilateral trade is growing, people to people connect will also come into picture, and overall relationship that will improve. Maybe Germany will be able to convince Russia what it wants and what the world wants, and vice versa. That was the aim, that was the ideology. But then, that is why you would observe that Germany had increased dealings with Russia for oil and gas, and it was very dependent on Russia. That is why amongst all the European nations, it is the nation of Germany which has suffered quite significantly due to the energy prices going up, because now it no longer has the access to very cheap oil and gas provided by Russia. And in the winter season, Germany has suffered. Same is the case with China. Despite the fact that Germany has encouraged its relationship with China, its trade with China significantly for the past decade, still it is unable to convince China on certain issues of global agenda and global peace, and China's aggressive posturing all around it, that is again something which is in a way holding a skeptical angle in front of Germany. Then, Europe's increasing prioritization of value-based partnership with like-minded countries, that is another approach where the entire European countries, they are now focusing upon the fact that, okay, those countries who align with us strategically in the terms of the human values, in terms of the global agendas that they will respect, we shall align with only those nations, which puts the relationship of Germany with China and Russia already at risk. Because the European nations, they are devising a new China policy, where in a way, many of the European nations, they are devising a policy to prevent the Chinese industries from getting in critical areas, to also put a check to the migrants coming from China, the migration which is happening. So because of all this, all the European countries are looking for new partners in the new millennia. And so is the case with Germany, and that is where India steps in. Now, India and Germany, their cooperation has been expanding for some time now. It is not a new phenomenon. The cooperation is ever expanding. How? So basically, you will see that Germany has begun a political outreach to the neighbors of China. That is in the case of Japan as well as in the case of India. So there has been that political outreach where Germany is trying to diversify its friends in Asia Pacific, and counterbalancing role is being played. Importance of the stability of supply chains is something which is very, very valued. So this is something which is valued by Germany and other nations, including India. India also, along with many of the countries of the Eurozone, of the Americas, all the countries, they want a kind of a reliable supply chain network which is not hampered time and time again due to supply shocks which emerge from China. China has been imposing restrictions and lockdowns ever since the initiation of the COVID pandemic, and that has led to an increased price rise and inflation experienced all across the world. So that is where Germany is trying to diversify those networks. And again, that is where India comes in. Increased strategic involvement in the region by military deployment, and that is where a German frigate by the name of Bayern that made a visit to Mumbai while en route to the Asia-Pacific region. And then also a recent agreement on a triangular cooperation between India, Germany, and a development project that these two can implement in third countries that provides again newer areas of cooperation. So cooperation is something which is expanding in all different areas. And that is because there are humongous amount of opportunities which are prevalent and present to take this relationship to a newer height, to a greater level. So what are the opportunities? First of all, Germany is India's largest economic partner in European Union. So the trade is the biggest lure, the biggest attraction of them all. Then collaboration in clean energy and clean technologies, including the aspect of green hydrogen. Germany has some very cutting-edge advanced technologies available to it. So thereby the technological partnership can yield and herald a new era, a new beginning for both of us. Then India's attempt to diversify arms import from Russia, where India has got a strategic dependence on Russia. Because we have been one of the larger importers of Russian arms, we need to diversify that. But then that has to be coupled with German export, in a way, independence, whereby the German defense industries, they open up their export to other areas as well and other countries as well. India would be very much interested to get some of the, for example, anti-tank guns from Germany, even the Leopard 2 tank, which is now being used in Ukraine. That is also German made, which India is very keen upon. Then the first ever trilateral military exercise between France, India, and Germany again is going to be held in 2024, further enhancing our relationship amongst the strategic and the defense forces. And then Germany overall is facing a lack of skilled manpower. And we in India, if one thing that we have in abundance is a lot of skilled manpower. So that is why with various countries that we negotiate with, we do negotiate that whether our manpower can fit the bill there. And we have enormous opportunities in Germany for the skilled manpower that you have in India. So there is a lot of scope for increase in cooperation. But there are challenges as well. What are the challenges? First of all, the coupling of industries with China oftentimes crisscrosses with India's national interest. In many of the cases, we have not allowed Chinese telecom countries to enter into the area of, let's say, 5G networks and so on. Then Europe is getting increasingly polarized on the Russian war, whereby either you are with Ukraine or you are with Russia. As per Europe's mindset, there is a no middle path which is available. And India's stance of walking the middle path, that is going to irk the European nations. And is Germany one of those countries who will be compelled by these decisions? That is again something which we need to see. And this war eventually will get over. At this point of time, when countries are basically scared of the war and countries are basically suffering because of the war, all of them, they want to form alliances with everyone possible and form an alliance which is anti-Russia. That is why you will find many countries, they are flirting with India regularly, and their aim is very simple: to wean India away from the side of Russia so that Russia becomes more isolated. But what after the war ends? That entire purpose shall be deflated. Now, even after that, will India continue to attract the same amount of attention? And will the nations of the European Union continue to pay the priority that they are giving or they are paying as of now? That is something we need to look at moving ahead in the future, and the relationship needs to be wary about it. Okay? Now, then we come to the third topic or the third article of the day, and that is how to become green hydrogen superpower. This is something which has appeared in page 7 of the Delhi edition, and this is again something which is relevant for your paper 3. Now, green hydrogen, guys, is going to be very important for your examination, mains as well as prelims, and that is primarily because of increased focus and attention paid by the government on the aspect of innovation in green hydrogen, and that is something which has been continuing for the past couple of years. So please do expect a question from this area both in the prelims as well as in the mains exam while you are preparing. Now, the context of this particular article is basically in the light of the budgetary allocation which has been done by the center while presenting the union budget for the area of green hydrogen. So basically, the union budget allocated rupees 19,700 crore for the national green hydrogen mission, right? And the purpose is to set up a program whereby after making significant quantums of hydrogen on our own, we can become a kind of a hydrogen generating superpower, so to say. That is the larger aim or the larger idea. Now, India is targeting at least 5 million tons of production of green hydrogen by 2030, which is larger than any of the single economy or the country that you think about. And green hydrogen requires renewables. And that is where you will see that it would create a demand for 100 to 125 gigawatts of renewable energy as well, and a huge investment opportunity. Now, all this is aim, right? Aim is something very different from what is the real scenario. Now, without painting a very pessimistic picture, we can all aim to be the global superpowers in something. Just because nobody else is producing it right now, we cannot call ourselves a superpower for the coming year of 2030. Having said that, first of all, let us make ourselves understand what do we mean by green hydrogen. So, I hope that we are aware that there are different types and different categories of hydrogen. You have blue hydrogen, you have gray or black hydrogen, you have turquoise hydrogen, you have green hydrogen. Now, this classification of that hydrogen that you see, all of them are basically hydrogen itself, that is H2. But then, why is there a classification like that? The answer is very simple. The process of production which is involved for the production of that hydrogen, that is what classifies the hydrogen into different types. So for example, let's suppose if you capture coal gas and if you carry out the reaction on that coal gas in order to produce hydrogen as a result, that will be something which is referred to as gray hydrogen. Okay? Now, why? Because you are utilizing that coal gas. Now, let's say while production of this gray hydrogen, there has been emissions. Now, if you manage to capture those emissions, store it in the ground, sequester it, that is something which will be referred to as blue hydrogen. So when you hear about green hydrogen, does it involve plants at all? The answer is no. Green hydrogen basically indicates the possibility of production of hydrogen in a manner where the energy required for the production, that is something which is taken from renewables, right? So how is the process of production going to happen, or how does it happen generally? So it follows a simple process of electrolysis. Something that you would have read in your very elementary science classes, maybe in your 6th or 7th class science, you would have studied about electrolysis, where in a fluid you insert 2 electrodes and you pass some amount of electricity, the charges flow through, and eventually you have a gas which is produced. So here the electrolysis of what? Of H2O takes place, and as a result of this, you have the production of H2 plus O2. So this is the production which is, or the produce, which is the green hydrogen. Why it is green hydrogen? Because the energy required for that electrolysis, that is the renewable energy. It is the renewable energy which powers that electrolytic process. Now here, India is basically a tropical country. Means what? India receives a significant amount of solar surplus as well. Solar surplus in terms of the solar insolation that India is receiving. It does receive in surplus quantums and surplus quantity. So when India is receiving that much amount of sunlight, it can be utilized to produce solar energy, which is a renewable source of energy, and that can be utilized for the production of hydrogen as well. So that is where the entire process is considered to be green. Okay, or eco-friendly, because it is not having any emissions in the atmosphere. Now, by the way, before we move ahead, for this purpose of electrolysis, you need the presence of this electrolyzer. That is the equipment where this process of electrolysis takes place. Now, this equipment is not only costly, but it is also technologically intensive, where you have significant amount of technology which is required to be mastered. As of now, India doesn't master this technology. As of now, just like in many of the cases, we are still dependent, and the world is dependent on China for this electrolyzer technology. And it is predicted that if we do not start producing this on our own, China will end up controlling close to around 30 to 40% of the global market for electrolyzer by 2030. So we need to get into the act fast. So here, what are the opportunities that lie in front of us once we start producing green hydrogen and once we become the hydrogen superpower, so to say? So the first is basically the clean fuel. In a country where we frequently read the news stories that 14 out of the 15 most polluted cities in the world, they lie in India, we do need clean fuel. We do need to get rid of the fossil fuel combustion. So cleaner fuel in the form of hydrogen can eliminate those issues. Then it helps meet India's commitment, which was made at Conference of Parties 2026 in Glasgow, right? And where India made the commitment under the heading which was Panchamrit, right? This COP26 was of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And there, India had basically made a commitment that 50% of its energy requirement will be from renewables by 2030. Also, the entire economy will be much less carbon intensive by 2030. So those targets will be fulfilled. Then, significant scope to make the industries eco-friendly. For example, if you consider the industries such as fertilizers. Now these fertilizers also, they run on significant amount of energy, and as a result of that, the fertilizer plants, they are also significant emitters. So, in a country where agriculture is a mainstay, where fertilizers are here to be used for some time in the future, and it is very predominantly used, fertilizers such as urea, diammonium phosphate, etc. Now those fertilizers, if they are produced from the energy given by green hydrogen, automatically it will be a greener production. Similarly, we can end up producing steel, another one of those energy guzzling sectors. And we can basically initiate the production of steel through that green hydrogen. So the opportunities are there in many different industries. And once we produce the various products from the factories in this manner, in a cleaner manner, that makes our product more sellable in the international market as well. We can basically pitch it to the international market that we are making it in a more eco-friendly manner. Then, hydrogen, believe it or not, is the fuel of the future. Be it the trains, the bus, the locomotives, the cars, you have the onset of hydrogen as a fuel, which is coming towards us with an incredible pace. So we cannot turn ourselves away from that requirement of hydrogen. But in order to achieve that kind of opportunities which lie before us, we need to set certain priorities straight. What are those priorities? First of all, we need to ensure that there is a robust domestic demand. We cannot survive only based upon exports. This is not 1980s anymore. We need to ensure that India, being one of the largest auto markets which is present in the world, India has got a sustained and a robust demand for that hydrogen. And that is where the site fund by the government, that is something which will come into role. And what is that site? A strategic intervention for green hydrogen transition. That is a fund for 5 years where significant amount of money is to be paid to the domestic consumers to encourage the utility. Subsidies will be given to even the various different factories and industries to encourage them to use more green hydrogen as a source of fuel. Then India can be an attractive destination for domestic and foreign investments if India starts to set up various hubs. We have already talked about that, how many lakhs of crores worth of investment, that opportunity lies in India. So India can capitalize on that, create huge number of job opportunities at the same time. Now, the site fund offers 4,500 crore to support electrolyzer manufacturing under the performance linked scheme or the PLI scheme. So electrolyzer manufacturing is very relevant and is one of the issues that we have to pay attention right now. Remember what happened in India's case with the case of solar panels? While the entire world jumped upon the bandwagon of making the solar panels, we lagged behind. China took the supremacy of production. So even today, while we embark on the National Solar Energy Mission and the National Solar Journey, we have to understand that much of the solar panels that we are making, they are straight away being imported from China. Such case should not happen with the electrolyzer technology. As I have told you, if the conditions continue as they are, China is taking huge leaps in terms of electrolyzer technology, and it is going to accumulate the market around it. And then establish bilateral partnerships in order to develop resilient supply chains. For example, South Korea, Japan, Germany, they have initiated these kinds of partnerships for technology transfers as well. That is something that India should and could develop. And also, India must coordinate with global powers and end up establishing a rule for global green hydrogen economy. That needs to be established, right? So that you have a standard operating procedure. You don't have some private companies flouting the norms, producing hydrogen and saying it is a green hydrogen. That should not be there. There should be standard verification processes, production processes, which should be eco-friendly. Eventually, it should not be that while we are not polluting the air, we end up polluting the land and the water nearby. So that is where a global set of rules that needs to be devised, and India can take a leadership role at this stage of time. Now, there are certain challenges which confront us at the same time. What are the challenges? First of all, electrolyzer technology, as we have talked about, is getting accumulated by China. Overall, it can capture 30 to 40% of the market by the next decade. And that means we will again be left as net importers. All the electrolyzers that manufacturers that you have in India as of now, they are basically assembling. They are not in the purpose or the business of manufacturing. They are importing the materials and they are merely assembling it here. And no global framework for production and use is in place. We also don't have enough domestic factories and enough domestic automotives or ventures where green hydrogen can be used automatically. So these are the areas where we need to work upon, and that is something where we can capitalize upon the production of green hydrogen. Okay? Now, India has also initiated the setup of a green hydrogen plant. Can anybody let me know where that plant is being set up? Let me know in the comments as we move ahead in the next topic. So then we come to the last topic of the day in terms of the discussion, and also the last major topic for mains perspective. This is the multilateral reforms as a priority for G20, and this is present in, or this is relevant for your paper 2 discussion again. Okay? Now here, multilateral reforms means what? And why is this topic in discussion? Multilateral reforms here, when we talk about, here they talk about the aspect of the multilateral institutions which are present. Multilateral institutions means where you have a lot of various different stakeholders, lot of different interests at play when we talk about this multilateralism. Okay, so many of these multilateral institutes themselves, they require urgent reforms. So here, while assuming the G20 presidency in December, New Delhi had prioritized that it will build global consensus over critical development and security issues and deliver global goods. Right? And it will talk about the aspect of reforming the multilateral institutes which are there, the multilateral groupings which are there. Yesterday also we had talked about the importance of this multilateral institutes. Now here, according to the G20 idea think tank, basically Think 20, they also have placed multilateral reforms as a priority. And then the T20 task force on towards reforming multilateralism aims to construct a roadmap for multilateralism 2.0. So that is where everybody is significantly invested in reforming the multilateral institutes that we have. Now, why is it that multilateralism needs to be reformed, and what are the challenges that it is facing that we are feeling the urgency or the need to reform the entire aspect of it? So the reasoning is very simple. Various different multilateral institutes that you see, take it from Shanghai Cooperation Organization to even G20, in the case earlier what was G8, now it has become G7. In many of these areas, you would observe that there are frequent deadlocks because the countries don't see each other in eye to eye. For example, in the case of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, frequent insinuations and allegations made by Pakistan against India, that is something which is not very helping for the overall achievement of goals that have been set by Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Similarly, the G8 nations, they eliminated Russia and now they have become G7. Now, due to that, there is a kind of a groupism going on there, and newer countries will be afraid to join them anymore because, again, that kind of a groupism, that kind of exclusivism, that is never productive in the long run. Right? Now, there is a utility crisis. Utility crisis in what sense? Utility crisis in the sense that what is the use of these institutions? Are these institutions coming in handy at all? Are they able to solve any of the major problems, be it climate change, be it poverty, be it price rise? Any of these issues, are the multilateral institutions solving them? Absolutely not. The powerful nations, whichever decision they have to take, they take it freely and independently on their own without worrying about the consequences. And increasing geopolitical tension, populist nationalism, deglobalization, where there's an increasing trend across the world to turn inwards. The countries are turning inwards. The countries are basically now taking a pride in themselves in the sense that we don't need to be dependent on anyone else. Under that scenario, the economics of these multilateral institutions, they are no longer fructifying the results that we need. That is why multilateralism is at risk. Now, there is a reform which is sought, and a reform which has been sought for multiple years. If you remember, or if you try to recall the discussion that oftentimes happens in the BRICS nations, right? That is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In those groupings, the discussion oftentimes happens whereby it is felt and it is a consensus reached by all the nations that, look, if we want to borrow from IMF or World Bank, unless and until we are good friends with the United States, that lending does not happen easily. If you want to borrow from Asian Development Bank, again, that kind of a goodwill nature is important. So in a way, many of the multilateral institutions, for example, IMF and World Bank, which are also referred to as the Bretton Woods Institute. Bretton Woods Institutes. Right, who are they? They are IMF, World Bank, and so on. So you have so many stakeholders having their stakes entangled within these institutions that the reform has been very difficult. And That is because the existing power centers, they don't want a reform. Why will EU and United States want a reform in multilateralism? They would always want themselves to be the most superior powers and the most superior voice which is out there. That is why today, or in fact for the past few years, couple of years, you would see that whenever India happens to contravene or contradict the statement made by European Union or United States, there's a lot of hue and cry in the domestic politics of that region, which is again something where the multilateral bodies, or the parties which are interested in multilateralism, as they challenge the existing power, existing setup, that creates a kind of a turbulence. Then you also have competing interests. Many of the different nations, they have very different interests at play simultaneously. So that is why, again, many of the times, they don't put in the required effort to make this successful. Now, what can be done? Provided that India right now is at the helm of G20 presidency, is the chair of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, these multilateral institutes, what can be done in order to make multilateralism a true representative force in the world? So first of all, mainstreaming the narrative for reform by maybe devising an engagement group which talks with the different nations, which talks with the different stakeholders, and talks about the importance of reaching a consensus that yes, a reform is needed. As of now, even that consensus eludes us. We don't know about that consensus. Okay? Then India should urge the upcoming chairs of G20, that is Brazil and South Africa, to take this issue of reform on priority. Now, both these countries, that is both Brazil and South Africa, they are eyeing a significantly larger role in global geopolitics. So it is in their interest to talk about the reform. So this is how India can influence or nudge these nations to take the agenda forward. Also, develop partnerships on global commons. Right now, the multilateral institutes that we have, they have very little in common amongst them. And when we say global commons, we mean poverty, eradication of hunger, eradication of the issues that we face due to climate, the climatic disasters, the loss and damages which need to be paid as a result of that, the aspect of education, the aspect of human migration. These are the global commons along the lines of which the institute should be set up, and they should basically set their lofty goals around it. Also, G20 or forums such as G20 or SCO, they can be made as an ideal role model, whereby G20, first of all, can always draw upon consensus and can be looked as solving few of the important issues that the world is facing. If that happens, that is when the world will get an example before its eyes that, okay, this is how multilateralism works, and when it works, that is when it is advantageous for one and all. So with this, we can significantly refurbish the idea of multilateralism that we have till today. Now, after this, we take a look at few of the prelims bites, few of the short topics. Very quickly, we will cover in terms of relevance for prelims. So one news that has appeared basically is about Rushikulya Sands team with olive ridleys. So Rushikulya is a beach in the region of Odisha, and that is where you have a lot of olive ridley turtles who have come in right around this time in order to carry out their mass nesting process. And that mass nesting process carried on by the turtles, that is what is referred to as aribada. Okay, so olive ridleys, that becomes relevant for your prelims examination. So olive ridley turtles are the smallest and one of the most abundant of all the turtles in the world. They are found in warmer waters, that is the tropics of Pacific, Indian Ocean, and even in the case of Atlantic. So a question can be framed from here that olive ridleys are to be found only in Indian Ocean or not. So they are found in tropical waters across the world. They are best known for their unique mass nesting called aribada, where thousands of females come together in the same beach to lay eggs. They have been accorded with highest levels of protection. They are cited as vulnerable in IUCN Red List. Again, important for your prelims. right? Appendix 1 of Sites and Schedule 1 in Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which means maximum protection. Now, associated information with regards to this, when we talk about olive ridley turtles, generally, they frequent the areas in Odisha around the area of Bhitarkanika protected region. This is where you have a lot of mangrove population as well. So Bhitarkanika is also known for significant amount of mangroves. And also, along with Bhitarkanika, in the neighboring area of Gahir Matha, that is also where these turtles, they come to nest, and that entire process, that is something which is referred to as aribada. Now, these turtles have lost a significant amount of their habitats, and many of them have been lost due to hunting and poaching as well. Many of them used to die because on these coastal beaches you had the installation of large floodlights, due to which the young ones who would hatch from the eggs, oftentimes they would lose direction because they would basically misjudge those lights as the solar light. And many of the times, they, rather than going to the sea, they would start walking towards the land, killing them almost instantaneously. So that is where in the entire region, that is the Bhitarkanika National Park Wildlife Sanctuary, as well as the Gahir Matha Marine Protected Area, in that entire region, there have been various conservation measures which have been taken, due to which now we are experiencing a healthy nesting which is being carried on. This is one of the relevant areas for current affairs. Now, Railways ties up with ISRO for train tracking. Now, this headline itself can be picked up for your prelims. You can have a question with regards to that. In order to monitor the railway movement, the railways have signed a technical agreement with DRDO, BARC, ISRO, or so on. So you need to be aware of that. Now, what is this deal? So, or what is that tie-up about? So as per this tie-up, Railway has basically entered into an agreement with ISRO, that is Indian Space Research Organization, to monitor the movement of the trains on a real-time basis, so that not only the railways but also the passengers will get a lot of convenience in tracking down the real-time movement of these vehicles and these trains. So that is where ISRO, with the help of NAVIC, the navigational system that it has developed, as well as the geospatial platform, that is the geospatial portal that ISRO has, that is Bhuvan. Now, what Bhuvan does is, it is used to find and access geographic information in terms of the location, and the geospatial activities are thereby reflected. So based upon NAVIC and Bhuvan, that is how within every 3 seconds, you will have the signal received by the railway engine and sent back again to the satellites, because there will be a SIM installed in these railway engines, and thereby the real-time tracking will be made possible. Okay? Now, then the last topic, second last topic rather, that is why are salt flats around the world covered in similar pattern of ridges? This is about the salt pans, the large extents where you have a whitish terrain of salts which is abundant in salt. So that is what is also referred to as a salt flat or a salt pan. Now, this is something which is present in many parts of the world. In South Africa, in South America, in the portion of Africa, in Asia as well, in India, in the region of Run of Kutch, you have the large salt pan. Now here, the article mainly talks about the fact that in the region of these salt pans, if you will observe, they have a very unique pattern that they develop. And that is where scientists have conducted a research for this pattern which develops. Why it develops? The answer is because of the movement of salts and how the evaporation of water takes place. But that is not very relevant for your examination. What is relevant for your prelims here is to understand that the extent of these salt plains, where do they lie? And amongst all of them, one of the most important ones in the present scenario is the Salar de Uyuni, which is present in Bolivia. So around the region of Bolivia and Chile, that is where you have large salt pans or large salt flats. So you should be aware that the largest salt flat is Salar de Uyuni. And moreover, Why it is more important now in this year is because right now the entire world is focusing on lithium reserves. This region has more than half of the planet's lithium reserve. It is here that you also have the lithium triangle, right? So that is where you have Chile, then Bolivia. So these are the countries which are very, very rich in lithium reserves. Now, how are these salt pans formed actually? The formation, basically these are those areas of shallow water bodies where for a long period of time there is greater evaporation and less precipitation. So over a span of maybe hundreds and thousands of years, the water ends up evaporating, leaving behind all the suspended particles, all the dissolved particles, mostly salts, they are left behind, and that is where it appears to be very whitish, and it presents a very picturesque tourist destination as well. Okay? Now, then another portion for prelims, I'll also talk about why it is relevant for prelims. That is 2022 winter year in National Capital Region is cleanest in 5 years, but still toxic, right? So that is given by Center for Science and Environment, that report. Now here, what is important is to understand the trend. Because questions are always framed in a manner in prelims that for the past 5 years, the pollution has consistently increased. Now your normal mentality will be to mark it as correct. Because normally we think that yes, the pollution is increasing. But in the region of Delhi NCR, even though Delhi is still the most polluted region in the entire National Capital Territory, but still the air is becoming slightly cleaner. Why? Because of both anthropogenic as well as meteorological activities. So the reasons are both. That is favorable meteorological condition, and also, let us put it that way, human effort. Favorable meteorological condition in what way? That in this winter, since the time of October and November, we had frequent rains which happened. Due to that, the pollutants did not, or there was no particular scenario where the pollutants could build up in the atmosphere during that point of time. So that is why most of the pollutants were removed from the atmosphere frequently. And secondly, this year you had lesser farm fires which were present. Many of the polluting industries were shut down. So because of these effects and impacts, the air quality index, that is something which has remained relatively lower. And that again brings the question to AQI, or air quality index. This is something which was conceptualized in around 2014, where you had a single parameter or a single unit which could track the performance or the pollution which happened in different areas. So you had AQI. So 401 to 500 is referred to as severe, and you have according grading and gradation which is done, according to which plans are taken by the government. So you need to know that 2022 was cleaner. You had meteorological impact and meteorological conditions which favored that cleaner air, and also you have to understand that what is AQI used for. Now that is all for the discussion. Now the questions from this, that discuss the role played by anti-defection law in providing stability in the parliamentary form of government. Discuss the position taken by Supreme Court in the Kyoto case on the matter. So here in the first part, you will discuss the importance or the objective of the anti-defection law. In the body part, you will start writing the various issues on which disqualification can be held, the exceptions. Then you come to the Supreme Court judgment and what it held. So this is something which you can write for 15 marks, 250 words. Then, what is green hydrogen? Discuss the possibilities that it holds for India in the coming years. This is again going to be a simple 10-mark question, 150 words, where green hydrogen in the introduction, produced by renewables, and then the opportunities, the challenges, and the way forward, that will complete your answer. So that is all from our side today. I hope that this session has been helpful to you in understanding the topics that we have discussed. You can please take up the quiz which has been put on our Telegram channel for further assessment. And please don't forget to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button and leave a comment behind depending upon how you like the content. So that shall be all from my side. Till we meet again, goodbye, thank you, and take care.